So Joan, this is the second film that you've done with Tom Ford, and indeed it's his second film. So you are one of the connecting threads there from one work to the next.
Mhm.
What was the attitude going into this movie? I mean, it's so very different in story, kind of different in style and tone, but
Mhm.
still very much a Tom Ford movie.
Very much. Excitement. I remember when Tom sent me the script, and I read it for the first time, and I said to Tom, when I got to the end, I cried.
Hmm.
It was that powerful. His script was so beautiful. And I don't think I've read a script like that. I can't remember, actually. Um, and then, as is wont to do, because that's my process, I actually read it again out loud. And it just opened up even more for me, and in understanding the characters, in seeing the rhythm of the movie, and seeing the three stories, the three interweaving stories that he really masterfully wrote in. Um, was it different than A Single Man as far as how we work together? No.
Mhm.
I think we just have some kind of a symbiotic relationship, and it's just wonderful. It's so creative and so thrilling.
Mhm. Well, the movie is so unique, and like you said, these three interweaving stories, and one's part of memory, one's part of imagination, one's the real world. So I guess it must be an editor's dream and nightmare at the same time, too. How are you going to?
Well, yes, you read this and you go, how are we going to do this? But it was so intriguing at the same time. I mean, it's a thrill. It's an editor's dream. I have to say, I'm really, really, really lucky, because to have this kind of material to work with, it's rare. It's really rare, and it's great material. It's beautifully realized and conceptualized, and really fun to take it even further and further and further as we did.
Well, how did you start with it then? I mean, were you just going off of what was written on the page to connect it all together, or how did it work?
Yes, yes. I mean, as far as as far as my first cut goes, um, I always rely on the script, because that's the foundation, and it gives the director something profound to work from. So what I do is I watch, I'll get the dailies in for a scene, and I'll watch every single piece of that material, because you never know what little gesture or little nuance is going to trigger something. It's going to trigger me. It's going to move me. It's going to say, okay, I see where this scene is going, and I can see where it's going to go in the entire movie. Um, and it has to excite me. There's something that I see that suddenly Amy would make a little movement with her face or her eyes, and it's just overwhelming. I mean, I can't, it's kind of silly. When I'm sitting in the cutting room, if you saw me, I'd be like, I laugh with the actors, I cry with the actors, I do all of that, because if I'm not feeling it, then the audience is not going to feel it. If I'm juxtaposing these images and it's creating some excitement for me, then I'm hoping it's going to create an excitement for the audience. But if it doesn't do that for me, if I'm not feeling the passion, then I can't see how the audience would either.
Right. Well, this is definitely exciting material. I mean, there's uh, kind of a blending of different genres in here as
Mm-hmm.
well. I mean,
Yes.
the film within a film, or story within a story, is this kind of Hitchcockian
Mm-hmm.
thriller. Talk about editing suspense. How do you do that?
Well, that's about rhythm,
Mhm.
and that's about how, what, first of all, what images do you juxtapose together? How long do you leave an image on the screen? How do you build up that rhythm and build it and build it and build it, and then when do you release it? So that's for me how you do the suspense. And it's not necessarily, I mean, a lot of suspense movies or action movies or whatever you see have just a lot of cuts, but it's really about the rhythm of those cuts and where you're taking the audience, where you're leading the audience. I think that's what's so truly unique about Nocturnal Animals is there are certain cuts, and I was talking with another interviewer about this, and she asked me what are my favorite edits in the movie, which is a difficult question to answer. However, I remember that one of my favorite edits is very early on. It's almost at the beginning of the movie. And it's the scene when Amy is with Michael Sheen at the party. And it cuts from her in her artifice, in her artificial world, her very cold world where she's emotionally distanced. And it cuts from her face to her face in the bathroom where she's totally exposed. And she has no makeup on. And she's completely vulnerable. And then she sits down. That's when she sits down to start to read the novel that's dedicated to her. And what that does for me, that particular cut, is it signals to the audience that you don't know what you think you know what this movie's about, but you don't. And I think it's like, I'm probably going ahead of one of your questions here. I'm so sorry, but but it is, this movie is about, it's really about three major themes that we, in all of humankind, we've told these stories over and over again. It's about love and throwing it away. It's about revenge, and it's about regret. But it's how you tell that story. And I think what makes Nocturnal Animals so amazing is how the story is told. There's also art right in the middle of all of those, because art is used significantly throughout the whole movie besides the movie itself. So it's, yeah.
Well, from the very beginning, I mean, you talk about keeping people off balance and saying you don't know what you're in for. I mean, from the very first scene, you say, wow, what is it?
The dancing women?
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, the blending of art and,
yes.
and nudity and rawness and
storytelling.
Storytelling,
because, for me, this is just my interpretation. I've always felt this. Is to me, those women dancing are like the beginning of Macbeth, and they're the witches in Macbeth, and they are enticing you in. They're almost challenging you, and they know more than you. And at first you're like, oh my gosh, here are these women, and they're overweight, and they're naked, and whatever, but they're so beautiful and so sure of themselves, and they know everything that the audience doesn't, and they're pulling them in. And then you find out, of course, that they are also part of Susan's world of artifice in a way.
Absolutely. One of the things that struck me watching the movie, we were talking about editing, suspense, and it's not your typical action movie because some of the scenes run rather long. I mean, not to give anything away, but that scene on the roadside when they first encounter each other, I mean, it's almost like a short film in and of itself.
Yes.
It just, it makes you so, playing it out that long in a way ratchets up the suspense.
Yes,
you
it
don't know
does.
what to expect.
Yes,
could
it
you
does.
talk about that?
Well, I mean, that was, the material was all there. And I think it was to leave it long. It's like the build was very slow. And it, when they're in the car, I don't want to give anything away, but when they're in the car, you're like, oh yeah, well, maybe this is happening, maybe this isn't happening. And then you find out, well, gee, it is happening. And then once you're with them and they're stopped with Ray, it's the same thing. Is it happening? Isn't it happening? Oh my God, it is happening. And by the time you get there, you've been through this whole scene and you are exhausted, I think. And then you don't know where you're going to go from there.
Right, yeah. Something else, there's also some kind of surprising dark humor in there in the
Yes.
movie too, especially with Michael Shannon's character.
Yes.
Um, was it hard finding the balance there to not make it go over too much into like camp or?
Well, yeah, I mean, because you don't want it to go, but you do want the laughter. I think it's important. And I think I'm always, whenever I've been in a screening, and there haven't been that many screenings yet, but when I have been in a screening with an audience and they do laugh, it's so wonderful. And it's wonderful for them because it is a relief. You are stressed in this movie, and then there is a little bit of a relief that is important to have that balance. And Michael was so great in it. I mean, everybody's so great. And Aaron is so great as Ray. And then Amy and Jake, unbelievable.
Right. I wanted to talk a bit more about them because I think the real emotional heart is their doomed romance.
Yes.
Right at the
Yes.
center there. Can you talk a little bit about that? It's so different from, let's say, the psychological thriller aspects of the Amy Adams storyline, and then the pulpy, violent thriller aspects. There's this love story right in the center of it.
Yes. Yes. And it's such a sad love story. It's two people who are young and innocent and have great dreams. And one of them throws the other one away and throws everything away, and has, her journey is one of regret, although the way, her link into the story can be interpreted many ways. In some instances, there's a strong link, obviously, in the novel to Tony, and with this novel, Edward manages to make her fall in love with him all over again, makes her feel again, because she has become a very cold person when she left him. But also, he's sort of, in a way, pointing her towards the character of Ray, in that she's the one who has created this enormous harm and has been callous and cruel, and committed a terrible crime of breaking his heart. So, again, there are themes that are big themes that we've had forever, and they're the best part of the literature that you read or the movies that we've loved. And it's the way this story is told. For me, Nocturnal Animals is like opening a novel, just like Susan does, or watching a movie where you are completely immersed in it, and you're inside Susan's head. Besides the three-pronged stories, one of the greatest challenges of this movie is that the story is basically told from inside Susan's head. And she is our dreamer. She's almost dreaming this whole dream. So the challenge was to do that without having a voiceover, with having anything else, just Amy's magnificent face, and how to interweave that in and out, and what happens to her at the end. I don't want to say anything about that, but it is interesting how art is used, that Edward uses his art, to get revenge. And for her, art is become this coldness that she can't seem to attain. She even says it, that she's too cynical to create. Which is, yeah, I mean, I hope that answers your question.
You definitely could tell it's the work of someone immersed in art. Speaking of Tom Ford, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what that collaboration is like, because as the editor, you probably spend more time with him than just about anybody else. What is that relationship like in those two films?
I mean, I am incredibly lucky. He is, Tom's a genius, and I don't use that word, I really only use that word very sparingly, but he really is a true genius, and so generous. He takes risks. He loves to experiment. you know, he could do everything by himself. He does everything by himself. He has all these different lives and worlds, and he writes. His writing is magnificent. But he also loves the collaboration, and he almost moves to the collaboration where it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. The other thing is we both love movies. We are passionate about movies, and especially older, what would be considered older movies. And we constantly refer to them in the cutting room. I mean, something that we're cutting together will remind us, one of us, about something else, and we'll start going off on a tangent about that. And then it will bring us back into a different perspective about where we're going with the movie. And it's so much fun. And plus, he's incredibly funny, by the way. It's like we laugh a lot, a lot. It is a really creative environment. And I don't think it could be better for an editor to work with him. So I feel really lucky that he gives me this opportunity. He's given me 2 opportunities.
We'll encourage him to make some more movies so we can.
I constantly do. I'm like, please do, and don't wait another 7 years. He promised he wouldn't. So
That's good to hear. Great movie. Congratulations. It was so nice talking to you.
Thank you. It was very nice talking with you too.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I have no idea how to shut this.